So first, I am so thrilled. I mean, you said $100 billion with a B, and the scale of this measure is truly thrilling. I think, General Manager Powers spoke to this, but we at the board have been talking a lot about world-class transit. I think when our riders see what BART looks like today, they're like, how are you going to get to world-class transit? That sounds really, they'll use other words, but very difficult. And almost hard to imagine. And I think it is truly measures like this that build the pathway to what we believe as world-class transit and that we can get there. The second thing I really love hearing in your presentation is the prioritization of public transit, especially in a world where I truly think that we are ceding more of our public space and our public realm to privatized transportation. I am in the belief that Uber and Lyft and even bike share, scooter share are not going to solve our congestion issues. I actually don't think it's good enough that they merely complement our public transportation. I feel strongly that public transit, that private transportation must actually invest in public transit. And so for me, public transit must be the #1 priority of faster. So I have 3 categories of things I want to give feedback on or just my thoughts. The first is on the expense side. I think it's very important that this measure and the funds fund both capital and operating needs. Obviously, overwhelmingly, it should go to capital needs, things like Second Transbay Rail Crossing. I think everything Val you mentioned seem real good. Down with that. But I think on the operating side, 2 things I believe strongly. Public transit is a public good, and mobility is a human right. And in that world, for me, transit is free. I know that that is a very bold statement to make. I think we are taking steps in things like a regional means-based fare program to get there. I worked on the failed Propositions J and K back in 2016 in San Francisco as a failed half-cent sales tax measure. I was really proud that we carved out, I think it was 12.1% would actually go to operating. And what we specifically called out in that was making sure that it would fund service to prevent service cuts and be able to increase transit service, particularly to low-income neighborhoods that generally are redlined or impacted by poor service, or they are the first neighborhoods where transit service is cut when there is a downfall. The second thing was to fund programs like late-night transportation. I think most people want to see BART be 24 hours, but we don't know how to get there. I mean, we need to fund operations like that. And really, the big one was affordability programs. You already mentioned means-based fare program. But, I'm really impressed with what Muni is doing in terms of free Muni for youth, free Muni for seniors, people with disabilities. I think BART can get there, and I don't think BART should be the only one benefiting from this. I think this should be regional, and I don't think BART should be I don't think it should be on the transit operators to fully subsidize. And I think even with the regional means-based fare program, I think 50% is totally arbitrary of what MTC is putting in. I really think faster must be funding those operating costs. So that's my spiel on that bit. Second thing is around revenue mechanisms. I am really concerned about the 1-cent sales tax. I recognize that you have acknowledged the equity concerns and the regressive nature. What I'm most concerned, though, is that you did not come here with a list of different revenue mechanisms that I'm sure you have explored. You simply said, we are welcome to talk about it, we welcome your feedback, but also 1-cent sales tax. I think that's a little bit disingenuous, and given the quick timeline here, I think the revenue mechanism is going to be key. And I mean, you got to do some state authorization, you got to get buy-in. And so I think it would have been more appropriate if you had said, here are the list of things that we think can get us to $100 billion. Our group currently is, thinking sales tax is a way to go, but you didn't come with that list. And I would have liked to see more, particularly in trying to value capture all of the wealth that is being generated in our region. And I know that you're representing Spur, Bay Area Council, SVLG. A lot of money there in the companies that you represent. And I really think that this is a question of how do people and, more importantly, corporations pay their fair share into our public transit infrastructure. We all have to pay our fair share, but my fair share is not Facebook, Google, LinkedIn's fair share. So I really advise you to go back, look at gross receipts tax, look at payroll across the region. I don't know what is legally possible, but if we're going to dream big, let's not, say we're going to dream big, but also only 1-cent sales tax. The last thing I want to talk about, and I think this is where, you know, looking for your response. I have real questions here, is around governance and oversight. I have a lot of concerns whether our current regional transportation governance, with like a sprawling MPO and MTC with limited authority. We've got 27 transit operators that have, you know, they range from a few thousand trips a day. I'm not sure what SMART's carrying, but to like Muni, which is 700,000 trips a day, and obviously BART is at the very top end of the trip generators. I'm not sure if we're set up to be able to handle such a measure, and if we are talking about the goals of this being very, you know, seamless oriented around integration between all of our different networks and all of our different transit systems. I'm not sure if just simply saying, but $100 million is going to get us there. I'm not sure at the funding level how we're ensuring that seamless nature, and I think that comes back to a governance structure. I think if you give X amount to BART, then X to Muni, and X to, you know, whatever local jurisdictions, that seems just like discrete boxes that you're putting things into, and doesn't address the occasional lack of coordination and the territorialism that we all know exists. So I guess that my actual question on that end is, you know, what kind of oversight is FASTER looking at, and what are FASTER's thoughts on governance reform? Is this the existing status quo structure going to be able to deliver $100 billion of projects? And how are you addressing that given how quick the timeline is moving forward? And I will end there.